I'm going to do you a little cowboy math. Now, I'm going to put 100 cows in a corral. And I'm going to loan my neighbor or give my neighbor 90 of them. So then I take them out and I end up with 10 cows in that corral. And he ends up with 90 cows. Okay, now I'm going to hold 10 cows out of that reserves, and I'm going to put 80 cows in the next corral for the next guy. Now we go on down and we get down, and pretty quick we'll have 10, 10, 10 and all these other corrals till we get down to 10 in this corral too, won't we? But when we all got done, how many cows will we still have? Then how come the bank did the same thing by transferring from bank to bank, but he ended up with 900? That's the difference between cowboy math and banker math. I was hoping you'd enjoy that. And this is what's happening to our society, and we see it every day, but we don't understand it. And it's time we start understanding it, it's time we think about how we should do something about it, what we could do something about it. And I can go on a long time telling you stories and telling you how to do it, but this is what it is. This is the basic thing, and I didn't dream this up. Like I was on a radio show one day, and the guy said to him, "Oh my gosh, you didn't sit down and just have a beer and get all this, did you?" I said, "No, I didn't." And actually, if you want to check, the first letters I wrote to the treasurer was in 1982. And I have studied this ever since, almost all my spare time. If you don't ask, believe me, ask my wife. You have no idea what it's like to live with a monomaniac. And do you know what a monomaniac? It's a one-minded nut. Because, hey, I'm kind of one-minded. I get on one track and I get started. And I have a great friend that told me about I ever met. When I first met you, you only thought about sports. When you got a little older, you only thought about girls. Then you got married, and you wouldn't think about anything but ranching. And now you won't talk about anything about how the money system works. And you can testify, anybody that I've ever talked to very long, the conversation always turns to money. And my wife, that's when she come up with the term monomaniac. And it's just things that, like I said, I like to try to make people laugh. I love to laugh myself. But this is such a serious thing. You have to really think about this. You have to get to where you really understand it. You have to get to where you talk to your neighbors about it, because we can't let this go on. How many really believe in this room that your grandkids can operate with 4 times as much debt as you guys have and have in your lifetime? And think not, maybe not right now, but when you was younger and what you went through in your life. Now you combine that and add all that and all the interest. And another thing I wanted to show you, interest has a real effect. Most people don't think about how big of an effect interest ever has. But I'm going to set up a little hamburger stand, and forgive my art because it's not very good. And from here I'm going to sell hamburgers, cooked hamburgers. Well, of course, I've got to buy my raw materials, and I got to buy the money, and so we'll say that everything it cost me to cook and make these was $1. Okay, so I borrow the $1 and interest kicks in. Well, see, if I didn't have to borrow the $1, my cost of business wouldn't be so big, would it? As the minute I have to borrow the money, and let's go on here a little bit first, because now I can sell that and make a profit $1. You know, I've got cost me, we'll say 85 cents, I can sell it at a profit, but then I can't sell it to anybody else unless they borrow some money too. And as the debt grows, the total money supply grows, doesn't it? And the total debt load grows. And the total interest load grows. So now we'll just take, and now the total interest on the money supply ends up to another 25 cents. Now the total cost of business goes up to 25 cents because somewhere we have to charge more for the retail prices to pay the interest, don't we? And I want to show you how some of this works, because this is an actual chart that I made from a beef magazine. In 1959, it took 3.5 fat steers, to buy a brand new pickup. In 1990, it took 21 and a half fat steers to buy the same pickup. Today it costs more than that. And then also, they tell you inflation is continually rise in prices. But see, we find that's not true because the price of the cattle clearly did not keep up with the price of the pickup, did it? Now let's talk about this. And this is a chart that I actually got. Actually, a friend of mine made it up. He's a radio ad salesman. And he was in a store in Austin, Minnesota that happened to have been there for a long, long time. And he found a chair there that was an old catalog, and that chair cost 30 cents in 1870. The nationally hourly wage in 1870 was 18 3/4 cents an hour. And in fact, when he first saw that, he said, "My God," I said, "It's cheap. What would a chair cost today?" And they said about $100. But he said, "It's no big deal because we earn so much more now." And on the way home, my friend Greg got thinking about that, and that's when he did all the research on that. Well, then in 1993, when he actually did the research, the national hourly wage was $8.23. The chair cost $100, and in 1870, it only took 1.6 hours of labor to buy the chair. In 1993, it took 12.2 hours of labor to buy the chair. So see, labor and raw materials has not kept up with the price of the finished products. And see, we don't have what you have, a true inflation, where it says you have a general rise in prices. We have a constant spread between the retail prices and labor costs and raw material cost. And it has to be that way because if the major corporations at the top are going to have a profit and they pay interest too, then they have to keep adding the interest into the cost of doing business all the time, and that constantly drives the spread between the raw materials and the labor and the finished prices we buy. And of course, people see the retail prices go up, so they say, "Oh, inflation, inflation." But they never talk about, wait a minute, the labor and the raw materials aren't near keeping up with what the finished price was. Well, if it was just increased from the money supply that caused that, why wouldn't the whole ship go up with the water? But it doesn't. We have a constant growing spread between the cost of the product to produce and the labor to do it and the retail prices. And that's all because of the cost of interest and taxes. And now your government, the Constitution says Congress shall coin the money, but they abrogated that to the banks, and now the banks create all the money, so the Congress also has to borrow the money, and so do the state banks and everybody else, and when they borrow money, they also pay interest, and when they pay interest, they tax us to pay the interest, don't they? So you have a constant growing right here. So now if we add the taxes in here at 25 cents, we got to have 150 cents for the hamburger if our costs never stayed up here. And this just goes on, and you can see it every place. And this is what really is our problems in this country. And there's only one way to solve this problem. You have to go back, and you have to start creating money as a payment and spend it into circulation for something. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, there's only 3 ways that I know of to move money. You can loan it to somebody, you can spend it to somebody, or you can give it to somebody. Is not that true? There's no other way that you can move money. So if you're going to put money into circulation, you have to decide, or you want to give it to everybody, and of course, if you just could go to the mailbox and get a check, how many of you would work? Well, who would deliver the mail if nobody worked? Because he'd be sitting home waiting for his check too. And how would you go down to the restaurant and get anything to eat? Because they wouldn't be working either. They'd be sitting home waiting to get their check. So see, that obviously is not a viable option, is it? Well, we've just seen what loaning does. That's not a sustainable thing. It can't work. In fact, when I was working on my new book, I got to thinking about this, and I did the math. And if I had just 10% of the money supply in the entire nation, and I started loaning it out at interest, and started loaning out the interest as interest, and every one of the rest of you were just using the money for a medium exchange, it would only take me 25 years before I owned the total money supply in the entire country. And you'd all be my slaves.